Welcome. I would like to welcome you to yet another episode of the Unpopular podcast. This is the man, the myth, the legend, Jalen Hunter. And what we'll start is this. So, one of the most important times in the NBA season is the trade deadline. This is where teams like to get off of players that may have big contracts. Maybe disgruntled players get to move on to another team. The NBA trade deadline is huge for a lot of reasons. It can change the fortunes of a franchise, kind of like the NBA draft, kind of like NFL draft. NBA trade deadline can add or subtract to a team's, I guess, pursuit of a championship. And that's where we start. I'm not going to dissect every single move because this year, more than a lot of other years, this year was extremely active when we talk about the trade deadline. There wasn't too many huge names that got off the market, but there were pretty big pieces that were influential in winning. Let's say that. So I guess what we're going to do is we're going to do some of the best moves and some of the worst moves, or moves that kind of was head scratching to me, I guess. And we'll start with the biggest trade deadline move, which was Rajon Rondo going to the Clippers for Lou Williams. We know that, especially last season, after the NBA championship, the Clippers wanted Rajon Rondo bad. We saw how successful Rajon Rondo was on the Lakers. Of course, he won a championship, and how important he was for the Lakers. And one thing that's no secret in the NBA is the Clippers need a point guard, a pure point guard. Yes, you have Patrick Beverley. Yeah, you kind of had Lou Williams, but he's not neither of them are a pure point guard. Patrick Beverley's really good defensively, but he's not good enough to carry any type of offense, or he doesn't really have an offensive package. And Lou Williams is on the complete opposite side. He is incredibly efficient offensively, but he is not good defensively, like, at all. And the thing is, the reason why this year's Clippers is different from last year's is not only did they not ultimately reach their success or reach their goal, let's say that, in winning a championship, there was a lot of turmoil in the locker room between Kawhi Leonard, between Paul George, between Montrezl Harrell, who's now on the Lakers, and between Patrick Beverley, Lou Williams. There was just a lot of turmoil. And that's why you see Montrezl Harrell on a different team. That's why you see that's why you heard a lot of rumblings about they didn't like the treatment that Paul George and Kawhi Leonard were getting. They didn't feel like they needed them. It was just a lot going on. And what Rajon Rondo does is, while Kawhi Leonard and Paul George are extremely good players, I think they're superstars in my opinion. I know a lot of people have a lot to say about Paul George, but I think they're superstars in my opinion. They're not leaders. Kawhi Leonard's not a vocal leader. Paul George, you can say he's kind of a vocal leader, but people don't really follow him like he's a leader. Rajon Rondo is a leader. Rajon Rondo will be able to bring some leadership, some controls to that locker room, or leadership. Some leadership to the locker room. And it solves their biggest problem, which is the Clippers did not have a point guard that can control the floor, that can lead, that can orchestrate an offense. Patrick Beverley's not doing that. No other point guard on their roster was doing that. So I think that Rajon Rondo is a huge move for the Clippers. Now, we understand that they kind of put their foot in the water with Kyle Lowry in the last few minutes of the trade deadline, but I'm not saying that it's going to win them a championship. I think that they're good enough to win a championship, but I do think that adding Rajon Rondo just puts another step into getting a championship. I understand losing Lou Williams, especially coming off the bench, is huge, but you still have pieces that are solid, and your biggest weakness has been filled, which is the point guard position. So I think Rajon Rondo to the Clippers was a huge move, and actually one of the best moves at the trade deadline. Another good move was Aaron Gordon to Denver. This is a good move on a plethora of there's a reason why this is a good move on so many aspects. One aspect is this. Aaron Gordon, of course, we realize Aaron Gordon's been on the Magic for his entire career. And what we've realized is Aaron Gordon is a really good player. He's really good, but he's not a leader. He's not a person. His talents are not good enough to lead a team. He cannot be a team's number one. And honestly, I don't even know if he can be a team's number two and that team be championship bound. But when you put him on a team with the Nikola Jokic, when you put him on a team with the Jamal Murray, when you put him on a team with the pieces that Denver has, he's an incredible piece for them. And while he's not the greatest scorer, he is an athletic big man-ish. I guess you can call him big man, but he plays power forward-ish. He's an athletic big man that can kind of play alongside Nikola Jokic, which is huge. This is also big for Denver because they didn't have to give when you get a player as good as Aaron Gordon. Now, I'm not saying he's a superstar or anything, but when you get a player as good as Aaron Gordon, you're usually going to have to give up someone big. So when I saw that Aaron Gordon went to Denver, I was expecting him to give up a young promising player in Michael Porter Jr., maybe Bol, but they didn't have to give any of that. They gave up like Gary Harris, who the relationship between Harris and Denver, it's kind of been rocky ever since, Gary Harris has dealt with a lot of injury and his improvement hasn't gone how Denver liked, and like a couple draft picks, but I thought that they would have to give up more. They came out really well, getting the player like Aaron Gordon with the pieces that you have. Like, I think Will Barton, they had to give up Will Barton as well, but Aaron Gordon with Nikola Jokic, Jamal Murray, Michael Porter Jr., like that's a really good team. And that team got a whole lot better because Aaron Gordon he isn't like a superstar player, but you adding a piece like Aaron Gordon. The problem with Aaron Gordon is he's been buried in Orlando for so long. People don't really know how good he is. Or people see the dunks, they see the highlights, they see the All-Star game dunk or All-Star weekend dunks, and people think that's all he is. While he does need to improve on his offensive game, Aaron Gordon is still a solid piece, and Denver really did well with getting Aaron Gordon. I don't know if they're good enough to, make it to a championship, but it does give a body that you can throw at an Anthony Davis. You can throw at a LeBron James from time to time. You can throw at a Kawhi Leonard. So it was a really good piece for Denver, getting Aaron Gordon. Another good move was Nikola Vucevic to Chicago. I've said this time and time again. There's a difference between being good and having good players. Chicago has not been good, but they have an all-star in Zach LaVine, and now you pair him with another all-star in Vucevic. And kind of like Aaron Gordon, because he plays for Orlando and they lose a lot, you don't really see, but Vucevic is one of the best centers in the league. And while I don't know what Chicago's doing in the short term, I do know that if you are trying to have building pieces, Zach LaVine and Vucevic are really good building pieces. So I think adding a player like Vucevic definitely could draw some players to Chicago if that's what you're trying to do. Again, I don't think, and I'm almost sure actually, that this move isn't like, you're not going to win a championship off this move right now. But this is a good building. This is a good build. Now you have two all-stars. You have two all-stars on the team, and they both play two different positions, and they both occupy two different places on the floor. So I think that it's it's exciting to see what Chicago's doing. I think that was a big move for Chicago. Another move, actually, which we'll kind of speak on this, is Evan Fournier to Boston. Now, I'm gonna speak on this first. People are killing Orlando, like killing Orlando, and I'm not gonna sit here and say that Orlando's being incredibly smart. They're gonna blow it up yet again and gonna rebuild. And here's the thing, I've said this time and time again as well. Look, how long can a team really rebuild? It's like at some point something has to give. Now, if you're going to rebuild, I understand what they're doing in terms of if they're going to rebuild, just have everyone go, have all your best pieces, get draft picks, do what you got to do, boom. But how long are you going to rebuild? It's like at some point you have to turn the corner. You look at someone like Chicago, while you have two all-stars now, they've been rebuilding since D Rose left. If you look at Orlando, they've been rebuilding since Dwight Howard left. And for my younger listeners and viewers out there, a lot of people don't remember that Dwight Howard was on Orlando. It's like at some point, the rebuild, you have to see progress in the rebuild. And if you don't, then you're doing something wrong. But go back to what I like about the move. I do like Evan Fournier to Boston because it gives Boston another score outside of Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum. Now, I don't think it addresses Boston's biggest problem, which is their lack of an inside center. But I do like the fact that outside of Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum, they don't really have a score that can kind of keep the ship afloat when either one of them's off the floor. And while Evan Fournier is not a good defender like that, he will be able to at least, he will be able to keep the ship afloat when in the scoring, because he can score. I mean, he had a game winner the other day, so he's a good piece for them. Again, it doesn't address their biggest problem, but there's that. Of course, the other big name that happened was Victor Oladipo and Bjelica goes to Miami, and this is huge. Miami has made some big moves, and we'll talk about Miami in a minute when we talk about the buyout market. But Miami has made some big moves, man. Now you have one of the biggest problems with Miami is their scoring ability. Yes, you have Tyler Johnson or Tyler Euro. I'm sorry. Yes, you have Tyler Euro who can shoot the ball really well. You have Duncan Robinson who can shoot the ball really well, but neither one of them can really put the ball on the ground and create a shot. And while Jimmy Butler, in my opinion, is a superstar, he isn't a superstar as terms of he's a superstar because of his defense and because of his drive and his leadership ability, but he's not a player that you can rely on to give you 20, 25 points a game. And while Bam Adebayo was really good, he's also not a person that can put the ball on the ground every possession you need him to and go get you a bucket. Victor Oladipo is that. Yeah, I understand what we saw in Houston has been bad, but hell, Houston all around is just bad. I mean, I pray John Wall finds some sanctity in Houston, but Victor Oladipo can go get you 20, 25 points a game. And I'm not saying that they need him to get 25 points, but those possessions where you need someone to go put the ball on the ground and get you a basket, Victor Oladipo could do that. And Bjelica, while he is a bigger player, he can shoot the ball really well too. So this just adds to Pat Riley and and Miami and how good they are, not only with the trade deadline, but with the buyout market. And of course, we'll talk about the buyout market in a second. But those are a few moves that I did like. I mean, I'm not going to talk about all of them, of course. JJ Redick to the Mavs was pretty good. I think that it gives them another shooter, especially with Seth Curry being out right now. Um, yeah, man. I like those moves. So here are some moves that I don't really like. And now I'm not gonna say I hate these moves, but there are some moves that I don't like because of certain reasons. And I'll talk about them. The first move is George Hill to the 76ers. No, George. Oh wait, no, George Hill is not a bad player, and no, George Hill. And yes, George Hill will help the 76ers, especially at the point guard position. But the reason why I don't like this move is because all you heard, and I understand that it takes two to make a deal, but all you heard was Kyle Lowry to Philly, Kyle Lowry to Philly, Kyle Lowry to Philly. Hell, he's from Philadelphia, went to Villanova, Kyle Lowry to Philly. And Kyle Lowry would be a better piece than George Hill. Now, if George Hill is all that you can get, then hey, it is what it is. But I think that Kyle Lowry would be better for a Philadelphia 76ers than a George Hill. And it kind of feels like the Andy Dalton type situation. You know, all we heard was we're going for Russell Wilson. We're going for Russell Wilson. That is Chicago. We're going for Russell Wilson. Go for Russell Wilson. And all of a sudden you see the report saying they get Andy Dalton. It kind of feels like the same situation. And while, again, George Hill is a good player, he's not the greatest, but he's a good player, and he will be an upgrade at the position. I do think that it is sort of a letdown, seeing as though all we heard was Kyle Lowry was getting moved to Philly. So another move, I'm not going to say I don't like it. It's just a move that I have to see. I have to see where what this matriculates into, and that is Norman Powell to Portland. And the reason why I need to see is because you gave up Gary Trent Jr. and Rodney Hood, two players that can, look, I understand that Gary Trent Jr., he's been struggling this season, like with his shot. I'm not going to say the season. He's been struggling the last few weeks with his shot, and Rodney Hood is a up and down player. And while Josh Norman has improved a score, it's like, you're not really getting that much more than the other. Like, yeah, you get, Gary Trent Jr. was a fan favorite. And Norman Powell, let me say it like this. If we're getting the Norman Powell that we've seen this season and the 19 point a game score, then this is really good for Portland. However, it doesn't help their biggest flaws. And that's the same thing that we talked about with Boston. While I like the move with Evan Fournier, it doesn't help Boston's biggest problem, which is a big man. Portland's biggest problem is they don't play defense. Like, none of their players play defense outside of Robert Covington. And Norman Powell doesn't play defense either. Norman Powell is a bona fide scorer. And then now you add that with Damian Lillard, CJ McCollum, who's come back, and now Carmelo Anthony, and it just doesn't. Again, it gives you another scorer, another person that can put the ball on the ground and score, but you already have that, and you don't need that, and you gave up a player that would be good for the bench. Like I don't know. I have to see it. This could be a really good move, or it could just be a really pointless move. A pointless move that cost Portland some money. So I don't. It's just something that I'm gonna have to wait and see. Another move, and I just talked about this, but I'll talk about it again, is Aaron Gordon to Denver. Now wait, I know you're like, wait, Jay. Wait, Aaron, you just said you like the move. I love the move. What I don't like is that Orlando only got Gary Harris and RJ Hampton. I don't like it doesn't make sense to me. Aaron Gordon is a top, I'll say 50. Aaron Gordon is a top 50 player in the league. And you're putting him on a team that has Jamal Murray, that had Nikola Jokic, that had Michael Porter Jr., who's a young, promising player, that had Bol, who's a young, promising player, that had multiple pieces. And the only thing that you're getting out of this is Gary Harris, who has an injury problem, and RJ Hampton, which we're yet to see. Like, we have to see what he's going to matriculate into. It just doesn't make sense to me. It does not make sense to me. So I love the move Aaron Gordon to Denver. I just don't like the fact that Orlando got. I'm not gonna say nothing because Gary Harris is cool, but and RJ Hampton's cool, but they didn't get. They got fleeced. Let's say that they got fleeced. So there's that. Another move I didn't like, and I didn't like this for a personal reason. Washington trades Troy Brown and Mo Wagner for Chandler Hutchinson and Daniel Garford, whatever his name is. Here's the thing. On the surface, this looks like a good move. I mean, Washington has not done good. They've kind of lost faith on Troy Brown and Mo Wagner is a piece that they can move, and then you get two pretty young pieces and promising pieces. Here's the thing that I don't like though, and this has nothing to do with the trade as much as it has to do with the organization that is Washington. Washington has already shown the lack of ability to develop young players. Troy Brown's not bad. It's just they could not develop him. And they just got Mo Wagner. So it's like, what makes me think that they're going to do the same thing for Chandler Hutchinson and Daniel Garford if they couldn't do it with Troy Brown? Like, it doesn't make sense to me. It's like, now I'll say this. If they do develop them, because these are two young pieces, if they do develop them pretty well, then I'll come on here and say I was wrong. But I have not seen them have an ability to develop young players. Like you could say, what about Rui? But Rui was a 3rd or 4th overall draft pick, maybe 5th. I think it was 9th. He was like a top overall draft pick, man. Like, you don't really need much. Not to mention you're playing alongside Bradley Beal. You don't. It is what it is, bro. If they're able to develop him or develop the two players, then great. But they haven't shown an ability to be able to. So I guess we got to see. And the last thing is OKC, which a lot of people's like, wow, this is crazy. But OKC has 34 draft picks over the next 7 years. Now, on surface, it looks good. Like, okay, 34 draft picks. Let's get it. Boom. Bada bing, bada boom. The problem is this. They're just draft picks at this point. And nobody's talking like nothing is guaranteed that these draft picks will bloom into anything. So it's like you have 34 draft picks on a roster with 15 rosters. 12 roster spots. It's like at some point you got to turn these draft picks into something. These draft picks have to be something, and they have to be good players. If not, you're going to look up and realize you had James Harden, you had Russell Westbrook, you had Kevin Durant, you had Paul George, you had Carmelo Anthony, you had Victor Oladipo, and you had Chris Paul, and now you have what outside of Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who's a really good player. You don't really have much, and all you have is draft picks. So these draft picks better hit on something. And when I say hit on something, either you trade them for really good pieces, or you just got young players and you're going to be in the rebuilding stage for God knows how long with a good player like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. But with a player that good, how long do you really have with him if you don't see any improvement? So, though, that was the trade deadline. There was a couple pieces, Kyle Lowry, that was a big name that everyone was waiting to see where he was going to go with the trade. However, it turns out he didn't go anywhere because, I guess the biggest name, the biggest team, I'll say, that was looking for Kyle Lowry was the Lakers, but they weren't trying to add THT, which I guess, if you're saying he's the future, and he's had some promising signs, but Kyle Lowry addresses your biggest weakness, which is a pure point guard. And if THT is the holdup, I guess. But Kelly Oubre was another name that was out there. But I know Golden State wants him because he's been really good for Golden State, but they don't know if they can afford him after this year. So that was understandable. And Lonzo Ball was another name I thought that was going to end up with the Clippers. You heard all the stuff that LeVar Ball said, and then he's on the trade market. Alonzo Ball would have been really good for the Clippers as that pure point guard, and the point guard, by the way, who isn't really looking to score, especially when you have a Paul George and Kawhi Leonard. But those are, that was the trade deadline. It's always some. I'm not gonna say always because there are years when nothing really happens, but this year more than any other year in recent memory, a lot happened, and I think that's because we just came off a pandemic. Players are unhappy. Some players have big contracts that they're trying to get off. And, it was exciting to see movement. And there was a lot of movement at the trade deadline. So there's that. And then I said the trade deadline was probably one of the most important times of the NBA season. The other one of the most important times of the season is the buyout market. The buyout market has single-handedly changed some. The buyout market to me is more important than the trade deadline because buyout market, you don't really need to change your team and get a top-notch player. And when I say top-notch player, let me not say that, because usually top-notch players aren't going to be on the buyout market. But you're getting either savvy veterans, you're getting players that are disgruntled at their teams, and they might not be in their prime, but they're still pretty good. Or you might get players that just isn't working out. And the buyout market is really big for especially really big for teams that are competing for a championship. Because you're able, like I said, you don't really have to give up many pieces. Actually, you don't have to give up any pieces to get these players if you want them, and they agree to a contract. In the buyout market, the two most important pieces right now in the buyout market is Andre Drummond and LaMarcus Aldridge. LaMarcus Aldridge, I think he's been with the Spurs for like 5-6 years now, and it hasn't matriculated into winning. So he wanted to leave. And from what being reported, his destination more than likely is going to be Miami, which is another huge move for Miami because it gives Bam Adebayo a decent backup, or you can play them alongside each other how you want to do that, and it gives him a veteran presence that plays the same position as him. And then Andre Drummond. Andre Drummond probably is the biggest buyout market asset that's out there right now. You're hearing teams like Lakers trying to get him, Brooklyn trying to get him, Golden State looking at it. It's just like Andre Drummond is a big piece, and he's still young. That's the most important thing. He's still young, and he's still productive. It's just it just didn't work out in Detroit, and it didn't work out in Cleveland. So it's just like it is what it is. They're saying that I don't know. I honestly don't know where these players are going, but they are saying that what are they saying? They're saying that the Lakers are probably number one in the Andre Drummond sweepstakes, but I think Andre Drummond would be probably more beneficial if you went to like a New York Knicks or I don't know. I know that teams like we're seeing with the Brooklyn Nets are building, and of course the Lakers with LeBron and AD. I don't know. I think again the buyout market is really huge, and you're going to see players like I said, like LaMarcus Aldridge, like Andre Drummond. Don't be surprised if we see I don't know, if we see maybe a Derrick Rose in the buyout market, if we see really really good players hit the market, especially with teams kind of strapped for cash with the pandemic and everything. So that's that, man. Let's move over to NFL. There really wasn't much that happened, but this happened. Yesterday, the Dolphins traded a number 3 overall pick to the San Francisco 49ers for the 12th overall pick and a bunch of other picks. And then they trade the 12th overall pick to the Eagles for the 6th pick and a 5th rounder. This is big on 3 levels. Let's talk about the Dolphins level. The Dolphins move from the 3rd pick to pretty much the 6th pick. And that means a couple things. That means, A, they have more faith in Tua than we think. Actually, you know what? No. Let's say this. It means a couple things. It could mean that they have faith in Tua and the quarterback that they're looking for, if they draft a quarterback, is not, ain't going to be a 3rd, or you don't need a quarterback, so why don't we just move down, because the pick that we want will be in 6th. Or it could mean, all right, well, they got a lot back for this piece for the 3rd overall pick or 3rd overall selection, and while we might not trust Tua, the quarterback that we are looking for, maybe a Zach Wilson, maybe a Justin Fields, maybe a Trey Lance, they will be sitting at 6th. So why don't we just go get them at 6th and get all these pieces? So it could mean that they trust Tua more than a lot of people think they do, or it could mean that the player that they want is going to be there at 6. So there's no point of keeping 3. For the San Francisco 49ers, this means one of 2 things. This means, okay, now a report came out saying that they have no indication they're not going to trade Jimmy G. Okay, here's the thing though. Usually teams, especially in a draft like this, where next year the draft isn't, especially in the quarterback position, is not going to be good. And this year you got a lot of good quarterbacks at the top. You also have a lot of good offensive linemen. You have a good tight end who can play pretty much tight end. He's kind of like a Darren Waller type tight end, and Kyle Pitts. But this means one of 2 things for San Francisco. This means, A, you trust Jimmy G and you're going to give him offensive line help. You're going to get him maybe another piece, like a Kyle Pitts. And that would be understandable because, like I said, Jimmy G, just 2 or 3 years ago, got you to a Super Bowl. So, or it could mean that they really don't trust Jimmy G, and they know that where they're sitting at, they're not gonna get a quarterback that can at least help change a franchise moving forward if they want to move off of Jimmy G. Because you're sitting at 12th, you're not going to get a Trey Lance. You're not going to get a Zach Wilson. You're not going to get a Justin Fields. And we all know no one outside of the number 1 overall pick is getting Trevor Lawrence. So it makes sense. It's either one of 2 things for San Francisco. Now for the Eagles, and here's the thing with the Eagles, man. I don't know what the Eagles are doing. You trade away, okay. So Carson Wentz is not good last year. I get it. Carson Wentz isn't good, and you have a quarterback competition, and Jalen Hurts wins out. You trade Carson Wentz to Indianapolis Colts. Then instead of embracing your new quarterback, you say, quarterback battle. So I don't know what the Eagles are doing. I really don't. I don't understand it. It just doesn't make sense to me. Because it just doesn't really show being competent. It really doesn't, because I just don't understand what they're doing with their offense. Now you're telling Zach Ertz to seek a trade instead of just releasing him. I don't know what's going on. I don't know. It's not a good run franchise right now. It doesn't make sense to me, but it is what it is. This has been a short episode. And this is the last thing. This is the last topic. There's a difference between reality and perception sometimes. The reality. Let's talk about Lamar Jackson for a second. There's 2 sides of a coin, but it's still on that one coin. While yes, Lamar Jackson is an incredible runner. Yes, Lamar Jackson is electric and dynamic and one of the better quarterbacks in the league. The perception is he is not able to throw the ball. And you're seeing that because you're starting to see that the perception is starting to take a precedent, or it's starting to be bigger than reality, because if you look at this free agent market, they're not able to acquire any wide receivers. Honestly, they tried to get Juju Smith-Schuster. He went back to Steelers. They tried to get T.Y. Hilton. He went back to the Colts. They haven't been able to attract a wide receiver. And we know that Baltimore's biggest problem is they don't have a wide receiver, like a number one wide receiver. Yeah, you have Hollywood Brown. We're going to see what they're going to do with Dez Bryant, but Dez Bryant isn't a number one anymore. Boykins, no. Here's the thing. Don't let success cloud needs. While Baltimore has been successful, Lamar Jackson's won an MVP. Their offense has been electric since he's gotten there. They made it to the playoffs, even though they lost the first game the first time, and the second game the second time. He was a starter. Don't let success cloud needs. Greg Roman has been stubborn when it comes to change, has been stubborn when it comes to being adaptable. He has not adapted well. There's players that have said that, players both former and present, that have said that Greg Roman still runs the same plays since that he's ran with Cam Newton and what's his name? Colin Kaepernick. This is 2021, and you have Lamar Jackson, and the league is kind of caught up to those type of quarterbacks. Not saying Lamar Jackson's not good, not saying Lamar Jackson's not one of the best, but do not let success cloud needs. Yes, you can be successful in the regular season, and Marcus Spears says this a lot, and I agree with him wholeheartedly. If the Ravens do not develop a passing game, I'm not saying, and this is where I said perception sometimes is different from reality. Lamar Jackson is a good thrower of the football. While he isn't the greatest, and while he does need to improve at throwing the football, Lamar Jackson is still a good thrower of the football. But he does need to develop a better passing game. The Ravens as a whole need to develop a passing game, which means you can't go into free agency and ask wide receivers or look for wide receivers who are good at blocking. First and foremost, I have never, ever heard a recruitment for a wide receiver and say, yo, you need to be really good at blocking. I've never heard that. And the Baltimore Ravens will only be as good as their passing game takes them. I know it sounds crazy because you have Lamar Jackson. You have the whole offense is geared around running the ball. Hell, the last 2 years he's been the starter as a quarterback. They've rushed more than anybody in the league by a country mile. But that catches up with you in the playoffs, which is why they haven't had a lot of playoff success. If they do not improve the passing game, they will not get to the ultimate goal, which is the Super Bowl. Look at every single Super Bowl winner in the past, 15 years. All of them have a top 5 passing game. I'm just saying, all of them have a top 10 passing game. The Ravens are at the bottom 5% every year. Greg Roman, you're going to have to. I understand you don't want to. Lamar Jackson can throw the ball. He just it's not his first instinct, but he's your franchise quarterback. You have to teach him how to do it because he's not a bad thrower. I've seen this man flick the ball and the junk go 50, 60 yards. So he can throw the ball. It's just you have to work on his accuracy, work on his timing, work on everything you need to work on. But he can throw the ball. But if you do not develop a passing game, you will not succeed. Yes, your defense can be incredible, but if your offense is only relied on running the ball, it makes it easy to defend. And that's why the Ravens are only going to be as successful as their passing game takes them. And at that has been this week's episode as the Unpopular Podcast. I appreciate everyone listening. I appreciate everyone watching. Please subscribe. It would definitely mean a lot to me. If you want Unpopular Podcast merch, I have hoodies, I have sweaters, I have shirts, long sleeves. Go check it. The link is in the bio. But again, I appreciate you guys. I love you guys. Until next time, much love.